The mainstream narrative is just give lots of value and it will all work out. It's very dangerous.
You know, an introvert can't go out there and hold a conversation.
In my past, I was an incredibly shy, socially introverted person. It starts with...
You just described all of the people who go to Vegas to hook up. You're a LinkedIn OG, we could call you.
Richard Moore is a successful sales expert that has helped entrepreneurs, coaches, and consultants get thousands of clients and master their sales techniques.
So how do you approach that today without it feeling like you're just one of the other salespeople?
Constantly restarting and restarting. $100 a day was the target. Selling is okay as long as you do it in a way that's received in the right way.
There are some pretty advanced scammers out there too. What you were describing before about that connection.
For every moment in the interaction, you need to interact according to the...
Welcome, Richard.
Thank you so much. So kind. And I'm really looking forward to hanging out with you two. I think even in the little bit before we were recording, we could probably spend a few hours together and have a lot to chat about. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We've been, obviously this has taken a little bit to set up because schedules, but we are finally here and really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you.
So, Richard, obviously, as we were alluding to before, also, you know, you're a LinkedIn OG, we could call you. But let's face it, you know, ultimately for you, a key area where you've leaned in and really been able to make a difference for people is around, you know, the sales side of thing. And you're somebody who challenges the status quo when it comes to sales, and, you know, not afraid to call out outdated tactics. And just really curious to get your perspective on what some big misconceptions are about sales today.
Yeah, I think that there's two ends of a spectrum, and people think is in very binary terms. They're thinking it's either this or that, and it's either, well, selling is being salesy, or in the online side of things, it's maybe we just give lots of value, and mystically it all just works out somehow, and I don't have to be cringe. And what we need to consider is that it's not about there being a middle ground, because that suggests a hybrid of the two. What I'd like to call it is a third way, which is a bit more elegance and a bit more thought for the state of the person you're speaking to. And I do feel that sales has a bad reputation because it's an incredibly low barrier to entry to do sales, not necessarily successfully. But to ask someone for a thing is a very low, very accessible thing to do. And the problem is, because of the sheer volume of people doing that, you end up with ill-trained approaches, let's call it. And you end up with people, of course, annoying humans. And I think what's so fascinating is that we're all, by the time we're adults, certainly even before, masters of the art of communication and interaction and the nuance of how we begin meeting in person. And yet we throw it all away because we have the wrong kind of agenda when we attempt to acquire a new customer. And the kind of the wrap the whole of this talk up in one is you just do it the way the buyer wants to buy as opposed to the way the seller wants to sell, and you're golden. But that it's just typically not something that's done, and I really want, it's like a bit of a crusade for me, Michael, to fix that.
And I love that, being somebody who, admittedly, I go into almost every conversation with that little bit of like, when I know somebody on the other end has something to sell, with that apprehension, you know, here, car salesman is usually what people would, you know, think about with it. Because look, anybody who says I'm not worried about selling a car, you're like, you're on commission. I know you're worried about, you know, selling a car. It does become that, you know, automatic. I mean, it's also their scarlet letter to wear, because at the same time, look, they're also like, no, I'm trying to help you find a vehicle that is going to get you what you need, which is true. Yeah. But people have this, again, apprehension around it. And so I'm curious, though, for you, when you talk about that and approaching it, and there's this level of like integrity with it, and actually what you had said about value, I'm like, dang, I've fallen in that too, because I'm like, just keep bringing more value. And I think because it's such a tactic now that everybody knows too, it's kind of like, okay, I know what's going on here. I'll give you my email. You'll give me a few things valuable in exchange, probably one more than I asked for. So
Yeah.
how do you approach that today without it feeling like you're just one of the other salespeople?
Yeah, we have to be really careful, because the mainstream, let's talk, if we're online, for instance, the mainstream narrative is just give lots of value and it will all work out. And I think it's very dangerous and the source of a lot of misery, because just giving value basically is easy, but it's also safe, and it allows you to hide in amongst lovely platitudes and nice posts that make people feel like
Right.
you're being helpful. And it feels like work because it's relevant. So it allows you to excuse yourself from actually trying to nurture people. And I suppose where I'm trying to go with this is that it's that the approach needs to be one of, okay, let's look at what attracting someone looks like.
Yeah.
And in starting this relationship in the right way looks like. So you mentioned you use car salesperson, for instance, but and we understand ultimately everyone's here to acquire customers. The reason you're doing this podcast ultimately maps to that. The reason why
Sure.
I'm a guest on it ultimately maps to that. But the
Right.
way we need to approach it is engaging with someone about their line of work and what they are doing with a view to then moving to a sale is none of your business until you've earned the emotional right for it to be any of your business with them.
Great way to look at it.
And what that starts with is building some trust with them. And trust comes from either familiarity in the form of seeing you lots, saying content or whatever, or you saying things that make them feel assured that you're not going to be awkward or difficult to be around. Selling is okay as long as you do it in a way that's received in the right way. And I'll try and be really clear with this. What I mean is, for every moment in the interaction, you need to interact according to the state of that person. And if that person is a cold, passive passerby, then you need to act accordingly.
Mhm.
And if they're a hot, active, interested person, then you act accordingly. Because at the other end of the spectrum, you get people who are really, really keen, knocking on your door. And I've seen a lot of companies that I've helped with this. They're throwing deals because they don't know how to handle someone in that state either.
Yeah.
And I think an awareness for where they are is really crucial, as opposed to, this is kind of the big thing, is as opposed to an awareness of where you want them to be, if that makes sense. And
Sure.
there's a lot of entitlement inadvertently when people ask someone for something immediately, when actually we should consider, are we asking a bit too much for the state of this relationship?
Richard, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is human behavior, human
Yeah.
psychology.
Yeah.
And I see how, and again, this could be my false perception, but people that are good at sales, and air quotes here,
Yeah.
tend to instinctively and naturally have a good way of understanding human psychology and human behavior. Is that your observation? Like, if somebody just naturally is good at understanding human, could be a good person, a good salesperson, or could somebody
Yeah.
learn that skill?
Oh, it's all possible to be learned, 100%. And I like to think I'm proof of it. In my past, I was an incredibly shy, socially introverted person. And even now, my natural state is being by myself. But what really, really, it was always the case that I was like, I didn't have a huge social group. I wasn't incredibly confident or anything like that. And I didn't really consider myself an ideal salesperson at all. I wanted to be in academia. But what's interesting is that you can learn a lot of it consciously, but also you can learn a lot of it unconsciously. And I think I learned a lot about interaction and behavior with other humans unconsciously to start with, simply by being on the pitch, And so my first job was cold calling. I didn't even account manage. I didn't even send them the bill. I didn't even deliver the product. My job was frontline selling, literally all day long. I wasn't even allowed to sit down. This was like boiler room back then. It was literally, you've seen the film, you know what I mean. It was literally just all day long on the phone and being kicked in the teeth and dying 1,000 deaths. Just, it's like constantly restarting and restarting. 100 dials a day was the target. To eventually chip away and start realizing what worked. And it was really interesting. It was like this, I don't know if you've ever seen machine learning, where you send 1,000 attempts at something, one thing gets through, so then you iterate from there. And like, it wasn't quite as inefficient. There were scripts and things, but a lot of the technique in my early 2000s sales job was based on the way managers were being taught to sell in the early 90s. And it evolved a lot. And, so it can be taught without question, but what it really requires is all the soft skills. And I know it's cliche, but it's truly listening, really having a sense of the person, and holding back a bit your urge to jump in and your urge to just throw an offer and hope that might work out because maybe. Instead, it's far better to have a sense of where is this conversation and think, what do I need to do with this person, this moment, and have the patience and recognize that if you know what you're doing, then you can trust that you can craft your way to a sale, if that makes sense.
You just described all of the people who go to Vegas to hook up. or to at least, or the dating, we could say the dating scene too, but oftentimes, I can't help but think about it in that way. It's like, there are the people who go in and it's like, what's your pickup line? How have you done that? How do they feel about you now? You got to warm them up.
Yeah. You're so right. There's I cannot tell you the number of times where people have said, you could be a dating coach, and I have no interest in being one, but there is essentially many parallels with that, because it's a human sport. This is about behavior and interaction, but what's interesting is so much of it is nuanced, and I love the soft skills. And one of the things I love the most is giving the hyper tactical, in this moment when this thing happens, say it this way, and that kind of thing. Absolutely love that kind of world. And it's that stuff combined with just time on the pitch that just by virtue of doing this for 21 years, I've closed thousands of sales, and you tend to learn a few things, and it's kind of fun after a while. Like you never move to a point where you never fail, because you always reach for something higher or bigger or more interesting. But what is interesting is just that it's such a fascinating art combined with this really like foundational science of like
in this art form, when you're engaging in kind of a first-time conversation, is there some set of questions that you always ask to try to start moving towards gaining trust? Or is it all custom?
It's an interesting question there, because it depends on the context. Because if I have a call now, it tends to be because someone has seen the content, they've shown a measure of interest, they've caught me on this podcast, and they've kind of sold themselves somewhat, that I'm positioned as an expert that could help them. So there's an element of being
a warm lead, if you will, right?
Yeah, as opposed to me dialing and there's literally no commonality at all. It's going to be a very different world. Yeah. In both scenarios, you have to be incredibly careful about your choice of questions at the start. Let's take the former. If you are meeting someone who you already have like some interaction with and is kind of warm, essentially you're well positioned, then you have the earned right in this dynamic to take the lead and to ask them questions. And a really important thing to do at the start of that interaction is, of course, to reassure them and make them feel like you're not going to be weird or cringe or awkward to hang out with. Just be pleasant. And so, like, Artin, when I joined the call, you were right there and were being literally that. And then, Michael, you joined, it was really weird. I'm joking. When you joined, it was really good as well, because we're being really pleasant.
I was hoping it would go there. Yeah,
it's fine. But what we're able to do then is dictate terms.
Yeah.
And because they came to you somewhat, you can say, look, let's do this. Why don't we learn a bit about you first? And essentially the agenda of a warm call is always 3 parts. First is about them, second is about the two of you, and the third is about you. The mistake is going, me first. Here's a bit about me. Here's what I want to sell you. Instead, keep your powder dry, learn some things. Tell me a bit more about your background. Then we move to like, how can I consult with you a bit more and understand exactly where the problem is? Like, so the past, and then the now, and then the future, which is you working together. The third part is, here's how I think I can help. And, so that's a really nice way to do it. So it doesn't need to start with loads of probey questions. It starts with, tell me a bit more about like how you got to where you are.
Yeah.
If I just kind of hold there though and jump to a cold call, it would be very different. And it's absolute suicide. DMs, calls, meetings to start with a question that you have no right to ask, but you want the answer to, such as, so what challenges have you got? Like, why the hell am I going to answer that? Who are you?
Yeah.
So when you start, it needs to be basically 2 critical things have to happen. This is what I learned doing cold calling. My job was business to business. I had to call business owners or managing directors or CEOs of typically 5 to 20 million pound or dollar, whatever sized companies. And you have seconds. So tonalities matters and things like that. But you have seconds to essentially do 2 things. One, show you could be relevant to them and useful in a practical way. But 2, critically, you have to give them some leverage. And leverage is the thing you're in that makes them go, okay, I'm going to stop and listen to you. There's a famous scene in, I think it's Goldfinger. I'm going to show my age here, guys, with the James Bond film, where I think it's Goldfinger, where James Bond is strapped to a table. They're going to try and kill him, as they always do, but never do. Legs akimbo, and there's a laser moving, I think it's Goldfinger, it's moving up towards his private parts, kind of nasty. And he's done. That's it. But he says something to the guy, and he's like, "Oh, hang on, stop the machine." And he has that killer line, and whatever he said, he's like, "That's too important." And that's James Bond with leverage. So he had the information to say something. Now, leverage in your cold call takes the form of you having a thing you can say that sits above relevance, because technically, if I could sell a product to you that technically you could use, it's not good enough because everyone does that. So what's the reason why you should listen to me? And it might be that we have a mutual connection. In fact, that's how we came together today. And it needs to be something like that. And that's what gets you the in, and then you can go from there. That's my micro monologue on it. But basically, there's 2 ends of the spectrum there as well in terms of how you approach it.
That's great. Are there other types of leverage that come to your mind that you could think about that people could use?
I mean, what you're looking for is a form of commonality or a strong reason why someone should work with you. And a poor example is, we're really good, please listen. But then everyone has heard that. So what you need to do is go to another level, which is, we're really good, and so say other people. Okay, so like, I have been working with this other company, and they've been helping with this thing.
Social
the next
proof
level
kind
up,
of thing.
the next level up though is actually so say other people that you know. And then the level above that is, we literally need help with some, or like I literally have a thing that your company is perfect for, like absolutely designed for. And there's a kind of a phrase called the Loopalooza effect, I think it is, by Charlie Munger of Berkshire Hathaway, wrote about this a while back. And is, if you can slot in all of these different biases and things, you come up with like basically something they cannot put down and they have to respond to. So there's a lot of science in what you can do. But yeah, I mean, the accessible one is, we know a person that you mutually and I mutually respect, and we take it from there.
So you said something else there in there that I'm curious, because again, and I can't help but make some of the connections back to dating to a degree. Art and I, we worked with this guy back long ago when we were selling good old women's shoes at Macy's together.
Right.
We go way back. And in that, there was this guy there, good old Tony, who he was more about the volume. He acknowledged, he's like, I might not be the best looking guy, I might not be the guy out there, but boy, did he use his job to pick up on just about anybody that he could. But his was more about the numbers. And I'm not saying he didn't get there. He was a respectful guy. I think he still thought about how you treat in there. But what I'm curious about is for those of us who aren't the Tonys out there, who are not even, they're afraid to put in those calls, whatever you want to say, like, how does somebody overcome that? And maybe the answer is you just one step at a time. But like, because a lot of people are just afraid to do it, and some of the people who are afraid is because they do. It's not just rejection; they don't want to come across as salesy. And I know you gave us some tips to do that, but how if somebody's standing in their own way? I'm picturing that introvert, even though you and I both sounds like are more introvert, and we can disprove that. An introvert can't go out there and hold a conversation. But how do they overcome that?
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to do, because if you don't trust yourself to know how to interact with someone, you're never going to project confidence at all. And I think that it starts with you looking at priorities. If you're a business owner, well, yeah, you might be able to get someone to sell on your behalf, but until you've got any money to do that, you kind of need to suck it up, and heavy hangs the head that wears the crown, And I remember my mother actually said to me, when I just left uni and got this job, and I was like, actually, this is really hard. And she said, you don't get to quit, by the way. I'm like, but I'm looking for a way out. And she's like, no, you don't get to quit. And she's a very good mother in that she was like, there's a lot of love, but there was also a lot of suck it up. Come on, it's called being a grown up. And I think that we're often looking for a way out. And it's like, the best advice is often, why didn't you actually dare to try a bit? And a lot of it's in our head, and it's almost in our head. And the people who are exceptional at selling, of course, have great technique and great experience, but they also have a lot of self-confidence because of that experience. And you cannot expect to have any amount of ability until you try a load. And it's not for weeks or months, it's for ages. And so the best advice I'd give is, firstly, and because the fact is we can't tell these people off, it might be they just don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Firstly, go find out some basics on what to do. Like, you can't miss nowadays. If you use AI, which is free, you could say, what are some of the things that I really need to avoid? Because a lot of it will be blind spots. Second, knowing your product well enough, because you should, before you dare to sell anything, you should try pitching yourself. So record yourself, like record the video of you pitching, and see how it sounds. And, we used to do this when we started, like lots of role plays and things. And if no one will listen, so pitch yourself. And when you hear yourself back, of course you will cringe because you're feeling awkward about it. But if you can set that aside and just say, well, what am I actually saying? Would I buy from that? What am I missing? And like, just start critiquing based on, does this feel like someone who's trying to sell to me? And there is a place where you can sound like you genuinely are interested in them. And there is a place where you can say almost anything and it lands right because of how you're saying it. And again, it takes practice, but you've got to embrace being clunky to start with. The only thing I'll add, because there's so much to add, but the only thing I'll add is time block a bit. We used to have like set times each day just for pitching and nothing else. And you've got to remember that it takes like 20 minutes of any task to get into flow. So if you like this, the people who fail the most are the ones who like try once, get a bad result, then come back 3 days later, then try again, get a bad, like, you're going to be rusty, or you've got to be at it all the time. It's the same with anything. Reps help, but reps in a condensed, focused, don't look left or right kind of focus time, is a really good thing to do. So commit. If you want to be great, you have to do hard stuff. And so I don't have much sympathy for people who aren't willing to try. But if you're willing to try and put out every day, then you tend to find you start getting a bit better. And if you dare to deploy some time into learning or getting help, well, then you tend to be all right after a while. And it's the same with literally anything. Because it's just good practice plus good technique and teaching.
Yeah, I think when you boil it down that way too, it's like, oh, okay, because everybody's overcome something that was difficult at first, but they did it. This may be a horrible example, but as a papa now, I have to say it. My son, he's has been spending his time playing the great game of Metroid. And he says to me, he goes, it was so hard to beat these bosses. But now he goes, when I go back, it's just so easy for me now. Yes. And of course, I try to use that now as that lesson for everything in life. And I have said that. I said, remember, everything's going to be like Metroid for you. It's going to be hard until you do it, at which point, it's a lot.
My daughter's the same. That my daughters are on Roblox these days, and the things you have to jump from one platform.
Obbies,
so hard.
Obbies,
well done. And they're so hard. But they're like, no problem at all. But you're right. Even walking, like they were rubbish at walking, and now they're great at walking. And they were so bad at walking to start with that when they first did it, we celebrated it and recorded it on video. So we've all gone through that. It's just so important to remember that perspective.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And those hobbies in our own right are those things you overcome once you do it. It's like, I got this. Yeah. Our kids are probably playing together on there. We don't even know it. But that's that example too, actually, with the kids. Sometimes they'll come back and be like, well, this person wants to be friends. I'm like, well, you don't know this person. They're like, oh, but they were nice to me. It's like, well, there's sales in its own right in that very simplistic way that you're like,
So both of my daughters, 9 and 12, many years ago, got their first sales online, and so this is something I wanted to teach them, and understand that. And it's interesting, the discussion as a parent on safety online, which is a whole other podcast. But it's so interesting that they're learning already to be a little more cynical about the way people might approach them if they're strangers. If you go back a few years, and Artin, you're probably experiencing this now with the age of yours. If you go back a few years, you watch your children when they're 4 watching TV. When a commercial comes on, they're like, I want this. And you're like, oh, come on, how are you falling for that? But of course, it's the first time they're experiencing it.
It's so true.
And so it's so interesting to see how, and this is what's really crucial for people to understand, is that there is a level of kind of immunity that people get. They're conditioned to know what you're doing if you're using archaic approaches. So that's why the used car salesperson doesn't work. The very first ever used car salesperson approach smashed it probably, and everyone fell for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Was that stone wheels on
like the Flintstones, basically?
Yeah. After a few times, my kids saw ads like that, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I explained to them what it is. Now, as soon as the main content breaks, skip it.
Yeah, they want to get to it. Although, what's interesting when you think about that, just on ads in general, because ads are a form of, selling, is that when it comes to movies and trailers, I actually seek out movie trailers. I enjoy those. Like, there, to me, it's like, it's that teeth. So I don't know my exact connection here, but I'm like, how can somebody, when they approach it, be more like a trailer? The thing people want, not the thing that they,
because you're getting a story, Michael.
Sugar cereal, right? Yeah,
you're getting a story from the trailer.
That's it.
It's true.
Well, that's one of the things we talk about. So we watch the ads because it's an interesting learning point, and the thing the ads that stand out the most that we really look at, my daughters and I, is ads for perfume, because they never talk about the perfume. It's always about an emotion, or as you say, Artin, like about a story. And it's so funny because they roll their eyes within 2 seconds, like, oh, here's a perfume advert then. And it's so obvious. But we've discussed a lot, like, well, why are they doing it, and what's the point, and why do you think it works, and it's so interesting discussing it. And but like, even on things like Roblox, seeing how interactions are a form of selling, and seeing how people are able to get quite advanced in conversations when they don't know them, as opposed to those who are clearly scammers. And so there's a lot of subtleties to learn there too.
Yeah, but it is interesting because back to, these things that we try to teach. And again, it's whether it's our children or whether it's, as we think about how we approach it ourselves, because as you said, it starts to get to that point where there are some pretty advanced scammers out there too, that again, only make people put their guard up a lot more. So I think that ability to build that trust and make it feel real, but then what you were describing before about that connection, that can really help again too, because now that, okay, I'm less likely to get burned in this deal, because that's what the other side worries about.
But
they're going to sell me something right away.
That's where we are now. And if you look at moving into 2025, where we are is that it's not that cold doesn't work. It can work because you might get someone on the right day. If you buy enough lottery tickets, you will win eventually, or you're meant to. So it's just that it's different now. And so the approach has to be much more based on the truth that trust comes from familiarity. There are some, for instance, A-list celebrities that you've never met, that you've seen in films, but you've seen so many times, you probably, because of a perceived sense of the persona, you probably trust that celebrity. If you met them, you'd probably trust that person because of how you see, how you've received them, because of the volume of times you've seen them, and that familiarity breeds a lot. And that's the technique being used with content. It's, if you can keep seeing me, but in the right way, then that does the heavy lifting. And if I keep seeing the same person over and over again, and then that allows me to feel a bit more familiar with them. So maybe I'll actually let my guard down and not interact yet, because most people don't interact, but I'll allow myself to want to read their stuff, and to, I'll be like, okay, I keep seeing it. Okay, what have they actually got to say? And you've got to remember that not all things are equal, because when we first consume someone's content, we view the same bit of content as when we've seen them for the 10th time in a very different way. Because what happens is we start coming a little bit more fond of that person because we like the way they said a thing. And by the 10th time we're seeing their content, we're like, I kind of like them. They're kind of my person, or not, in which case I've gone. But, and then it's like, who is this person? You click on their profile. Now we're there. And with that, over time, with enough frequency, it does this low-key nurturing that results in them kind of falling in love with you a bit. And then you position, the way I describe it is, you are no longer going from obscurity to an expert. You're moving from an expert to their expert. Now they're choosing you as the font of knowledge over anyone else who may be better or has more followers or whatever, but they're choosing you because you just have the right vibe for them. And that now is really where we want to meet them. And because we can do that, it's starting to borderline being absurd to approach someone completely cold, and especially with the tools we've got nowadays, we should at least be, if we're going to approach someone cold, it should be, as I mentioned earlier, at least because we've got something in common or something that they did, even if it was low level. If someone looked at my profile, we've not interacted, but I would certainly prefer to reach out and speak to that person over someone identical in many ways demographically, but who'd never seen me or heard of me before. So I prefer that kind of quasi cold as opposed to truly cold lead.
Richard, I mean, it's so fascinating. You talk about, the number of interactions through the content. And, we got introduced to you through Laura Acosta, who's kind of, obviously doing, is a friend of the podcast and doing really great on LinkedIn. But on the podcast, when we talked to her, she credited you as kind of in the beginning, guiding her and showing her the right way. So if Laura came to you today and said, how do I become successful in selling online on LinkedIn? What would you tell her today versus what you told her 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because for those who don't know Lara, where she is now is that she's incredible popularity and a lot of people are very fond of her. And that starts with a persona that she's broadcasted, which is incredibly authentic in the sense that the person you see online is the person she is. But also what I love is that there's depth there too. She's not just pretending or mimicking or regurgitating. She's actually got a lot of depth and thought, and she's a real student of the art of content marketing. And what's interesting is that she's gained that popularity through 2.5 years on LinkedIn of solidly grinding all hours, to the point where I'm like, you really should get some sleep, But so what I'd be telling her now is, you need to consider, I mean, if she wasn't converting, I'd be saying to her, you need to consider what comes next. And herein is the most important part of content marketing, is that content is not king. Content is not everything, nor even is your community or your audience. It's the start point. And a lot of people feel it's the whole game. And now the people who wake up and think, oh, I wonder how well on my mobile, I wonder how well my content did last night. Instead, it should be like, well, that's the start. So what's next? And so the advice I'd be giving her, if all things were as they are now, but she had no money, is, well, where are you sending the people? And on the basis that the content, this is crucial for all content, on the basis that the content is saying the right things to the right people, as in those you're trying to ultimately acquire as a customer, then where are you leading them next? So the human animal, purely through the way it's built, is naturally curious. So if we say or do something stimulating, we're naturally going to click on that profile link and say, well, who is this Lara Acosta person? You know, we're just hardwired to be that kind of voyeur. It might be that we really don't like them. We might be very toxic and need serious therapy, in which case we'll click on them because we'll be like, well, let me find something wrong with this person so I can make myself feel better about my world.
Yeah.
Or indeed, ideally, it's more like, wow, that's really good. Who is this person? And now I can go learn some more. So, you know, it follows that if the process is content, profile, well, where's next? Like, what is the next link, and what's that user experience look like? If you're looking at high ticket, low volume sales, then you need to be meeting them in the DMs. So the magic happens in the one-on-one interactions in the DMs. Sure, reply to comments, but if someone looks at your profile, that's a massive tell that you stimulated that response. If they do comment, or if they, you know, if they're interacting in some way, well, then so connect with them and get talking. The vast majority of my larger deals, rather than little, you know, the little kind of joke three-figure ones, they come from lurkers who aren't, you know, mucking around writing comments on posts. They are a senior decision maker at a business, and they are looking, then they click, and then they're gone. So you need to meet them there, and it's the next thing. So that advice is really important. She doesn't need help with her content. The question is, what comes next, and what are you going to do with that traffic, knowing as you do the states that they are in when they arrive at your profile.
It's really interesting. A few things you said there, and I want to make sure I get them right, because I think it's I know I've run into them, and I'm sure other have as well. But so, you know, it makes sense around the DMs and people who have viewed, but I think a lot of the time people have this tendency to be like, oh, okay, they viewed, they went away, you know, they didn't comment, they didn't do anything like that. And then that might tell the person, oh, okay, no, they were just a looky-loo. But the reality is that they could be worth chasing. And it sounds like they should probably be chased. I mean, I say that with all due respect, you know.
Yes.
Is that correct? And if so, what's the tasteful way to do so that it doesn't come across like, because this is where that thing kicks in for people who are like, oh no, I don't want to bother them, or they already, you know, like, how should somebody approach that?
So isn't literally the $1 million question. And what's interesting is that we must not fall for the narratives in our head, because we don't know that person at all. And I don't want to disturb them is 100% a narrative we should remove. You're on LinkedIn. The point of LinkedIn, and I know because I work with them, like as a paid consultant at times with them, and they've said, well, obviously people are here for client acquisition, and I'm like, you're dead right. So I've worked with them directly, and they agree too, and we all know deep down we're there for business. So it is absurd to not interact with people, but you're right, you need to do it in an elegant way. It is about what question would be reasonable given the state of this relationship. They've looked at your content and they decided to click on your profile and look at you and then go. It's the real world equivalent of someone has walked past your shop window every day for the last, 10 days and looked, but today they came in just to like, what is this shop? And then they went. It's entirely reasonable. It's culturally not what we do, but it's entirely reasonable online to say to them, hey, I just want to say thanks for dropping by
Mm.
or for looking at my profile, that really means a lot to me. So we've acknowledged what they did and then ask, was there anything that caught your eye? Was there anything there that was interesting? Thanks so much. That's all. It's entirely reasonable if someone does a thing
Yeah.
in your house to ask them what made them do it, or if they caught it, if that caught their eye. Now you can't go chasing someone down the street if you do run a shop and say, "Hi, you came in," but I mean, you kind of could. You kind of could. But if someone's in the shop, like, what do you get asked? You get like, "Can I help?"
If you
But
sell
you-
running
that's
shoes,
it.
that might be absolutely what you should do.
Absolutely,
know?
you could. But my point is, like, it's insane to think that just because they looked and left, that's nothing.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's a big,
great
big
point.
deal that everyone's busy, right? And everyone has got other things to do. But someone decided to stop everything and deploy some time,
Yeah.
had such compelling curiosity that they wanted to look at your profile. We think that that's just so pointless to consider. It's huge. It's a really big sign that there's a level of interest, good or bad. And the problem is we're getting to, like our diamond shoes are too tight. When we're like, well, no one's sending any comments. No one's writing any DMs. It's like, yeah, it was because not everyone does. And most people look and go. That's the crucial thing to be aware of.
I think for me, there's two parts of what you just said that resonate a lot. The first part is I've had situations where I've kind of clicked on somebody's profile because the content was like, oh, this is interesting. Who is this person? And then I have gotten that DM that said, hey, I saw you visited my profile. Why did you visit my profile? What was interesting about it? And that catches me off guard. I'm like, oh my God, maybe I need to go back into the profile, study it a little more so I can actually respond in a more intelligent way so I don't come across as a creeper. I just click on. And then the other part is there's this mental block, and I know I have, and I don't know, Michael, you might say, yes, I'm in that camp too, but I know others. When you get people that are kind of coming to your profile, the initial gut reaction is, oh, they were checking my profile so they can sell me something. Then the guards go up. Versus they're checking the profile to actually see if they want to buy something. And I've had a struggle with that anytime somebody visits my profile, my initial reaction is, what are they trying to sell me? Why do they look here? Let me look at if they're going to DM me or not. And obviously that sends me down the wrong rabbit hole. So I know it's a mental thing, but
it's such an interesting point because people are in their heads about this. And what I'll say back is, so maybe they are trying to sell something, but why does that mean you can't sell to them?
Right. That's a great point.
Like, so I remember years ago, and I still repost the video every so often. Years ago, I had someone go into my DMs and they spammed me with like a pitch as the first message. It was like a templated pitch. So they were trying to sell to me. Cut to half an hour later, and we're having a call, and they were $2,000 deal. Because I was like, well, like, how's this working for you? So the problem is they came to the wrong guy because I was like, this will be sport. This is sport for me. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's not even about the money. It's just fun too. So I said, like, how's this working? And they said, oh, I'm so sorry. It's like, it's this VA we're using and they're spamming everyone. I hope it wasn't intruding. I'm like, it's just interesting that people do this. Is it getting results? And she's like, well, no, not really. And I knew I had her the moment she gave me an answer. And I was like, and then basically it was like, well, what do you think's the problem? And that, and she's like, well, I'm trying this and this. I'm like, how about this? How about that? Then it's a call, and then she joined the program. So the thing is, even people who do literally what I do, who would ultimately be able to sell to me their thing, sometimes end up buying my thing, because it's like, well, actually, based on our interaction now, Richard, it seems like you could help me more. And the number, my accelerator has 200 people in it, right? And the number of people in there who are like LinkedIn and conversion coaches is crazy, because they feel like, well, I'm doing fine, but I could do a little bit better. This guy seems to know what he's doing. I'll learn a bit more. So, if you do different things, so what if they want to try and sell you? Because you could sell them your thing. And it's a case of whose needs most important and how you handle the interaction. And it's a great way to look at it.
You know,
Everyone is an opportunity. That's the thing, and it's such a wonderful experience when you look at it that way. And it's like, worst case scenario should be that you have a pleasant interaction. Nothing more happens other than you decide to stay connected, and guess who sees your content tomorrow? They do. And then again, and we get on really well, and they feel warm and fuzzy about me. And in 8 months' time, they might be like, do you know what? I think I could help you. And so
yeah.
at the very least, you're nurturing someone who might be a new commenter on your post, or someone who adds a valuable impression. So I think that should be your worst case scenario, in my opinion.
I love that. And I have to just go back to what you said too about the person coming into the shop, because again, hearkening back to Art and I's Women's Shoes, or anytime you worked, anybody who's worked retail or anywhere else, you would never not greet. I mean, I like to think most people, when it's why would you? And you're, you know, the boss, the owner, all those are going to say greet anybody who comes in, because they see them as that potential customer. And like that's a tweak in my own brain I have to think about too, because it's like, no, they showed up in your store and you're not even going to say hello and see what they need. It's like, wow, before you just thought about, oh, looky loo, bye. No, not a looky loo. Yeah.
So here's the thing, but this is what's so interesting about it, is that the sentiment should still be there, but the approach needs to have evolved. Because what actually happened, of course, what we're saying is we've got to go past the point of actually trying. Fine. But if you do work in a shop and you go up to someone and say, can I help? What is the one thing they always say? No, thanks. Just browsing. And it's like, it's not like they wondered if there were shop people who could help them if they needed something.
Good point.
They know you're there if they need. So the question is, well, what kind of question do you ask instead? How do you evolve that? In a world where people are conditioned against the standard question, what do you say differently? And a really nice way to look at it is, if you think about the way you're coming across is, can I help? I'm not saying this is the wording, but the way you're approaching this interaction is, can I help? Which is poor positioning. That positions them as the expert, the person in charge, and the prize. We need to flip that. So you change the first two words over in your attitude. Instead of can I help, it should be I can help. When you say I can help, even internally, before an interaction, who now is the expert? You are, because you are anyway. The only scenarios really where someone is an expert is when you couldn't possibly know what flavor they need best. So, and as a quick example, if I'm buying flowers for my wife, I'm the expert. If I'm choosing what burger I'll have at some nasty fast food chain, I'm the expert. Having said that, there are still experts in those scenarios, because when I buy flowers for my wife, I know what she likes, but who knows how to put the bouquet together? The expert does. You know, and who knows how to make the burger correctly? The expert in the Outback who makes the burger. So we need to remember that there's these dynamics in play, and there's always a lead, and there's always a there's always like an alpha and one person who's a beta. So the approach instead should be, look, I've got this, I can help, and being a bit more consultative. It's really as simple as that. And so you find that those in that scenario in a shop, those that do better are the ones who get the context that someone is browsing, and they meet them at that. And they don't say things like, can I help? But they recognize they shouldn't intrude too much, but they just make a comment or something based on an activity that person's doing, something specialized, something kind of personalized. So if that person picked something up and like looked at it, you'd want to make a comment to say something about it, so it's specific to that person, you know, and it demonstrates you're an expert. It won't always work, but it's far better than can I help, because that kills the conversation.
No, it's a good point. Even though, again, I admit I'm that person who's in any of those stores. I'm like, leave me alone. I'm in here. You know, you're making me uncomfortable. Absolutely. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that, again, you know, with time that warms up, or it's differently, or when I actually really do need something, then I know who I could turn to, because that was established. Ice was broken.
Yeah. And if we go to the digital world, the job, therefore, of the content is it to make it so compelling that the probability becomes higher.
Right.
That the person looking at you is like, yeah, I kind of am keen. This is like overwhelmingly good. So I posted today, for instance, about 3 hours ago, about someone in my group, Art of Sell, who made an $18,500 deal using one of the
Nice.
techniques from the masterclasses. Therefore, I'm hoping to spike interest on me and my profile and my Art of Sell program from people who are like, wow, that's really impressive. Because I thought if I post, yay, someone got 10x their profile or got like 4 leads today or some like pithy level of results, then they're going to be in that state where they're like, oh no, leave me alone. I look, oh yeah, I was on your profile, but I'm not that bothered. What this all says, when you reduce it down, is we need to be significantly compelling that they're like, yeah, you can help me. I had no idea such a shop could exist. And so it ultimately urges us, really, this understanding this, it urges us to be as premium and customer led as possible in terms of what they get, the experience they have, and how well you're positioned. So make it good. Like if your shop's tatty and rubbish and the products are no good, don't expect much beyond like a no thank you, I'm browsing. But if it's like this world-class shop, well then they'll be like, everyone should be wanting to come in. And when they come in, they should be like, how do I buy this thing? And then that's what we're mapping towards in terms of the buyer experience at the top end of this funnel. Not, here's me being grateful today in a post and hoping that somehow people buy stuff. Do you see what I mean? So when it
reminds me of the 45-minute line I waited in with my wife in Paris getting into the Hermes store.
Yeah,
it's like, why are we waiting
Disneyland with my girls this year is the same principle. I'm like, there's a point when I popped out of the trance. I'm like, look at what we're doing. But it was just like the whole narrative is like carved out this idea that we need to be here and this is important to us. And, you know, some companies do it so well. Like when the next iPhone comes out, people will be selling things to find the money to get that iPhone because it matters to them so much. And it's just so interesting. Like that's what we need to move towards.
Well, and I think with that too, and I don't know if I'm on the right track here or not, but again, as you mentioned, value and value is something that people talk about pushing more. It really comes down to, trust. Because in these scenarios, that's ultimately what it comes down to. And whether, again, it's through that connection somebody makes to you, or whether it is, thinking about, trips to places like Disney, anything like that, the things you're willing to do when you're like, well, here's what we, know we're going to get out of this and we're willing to do this exchange. And that trust can take a bit of time to build, but again, through great content, you accelerate the trust building, or I say accelerate, you're planting the seeds so that you could start building that trust. So by the time you actually have that conversation, it's
much more scalable with content because you're not speaking to whoever can technically hear you. You're now using a platform with a very generous algorithm. But then the level above is to recognize that you can, I really want to use a better term than cash in. Cash in, let's use it. Cash in on the biases that the humans in the audience have, such as association bias. So, for instance, our friend Lara Acosta and I did an audio room together last week, and 2,000 people came to it. And probably a lot of those are her audience rather than mine. But there'll be a lot of people, specifically if we zone in on this, a lot of people who know Lara Acosta who are like, who the hell's this guy? But if he's friends with Lara and she's saying nice stuff about him, maybe I should like him. And hang on, it feels herd mentality is the next bias. Maybe a lot of people seem to be liking this guy. I'll check him out as well. Maybe I'm meant to, this is what really happens. Maybe I'm meant to like him too. And so we don't even consider if we like them or not, because everyone else does. I'm meant to too. Oh, Taylor Swift released a new song. I'm supposed to like Taylor Swift, so I suppose this music is what I like, as opposed to, do I like Taylor Swift or not? And so it's so interesting that there's herd mentality, but there's a lot of authority we can add there as well, and in terms of how we say things and how we position ourselves. For instance, when we collaborate with people, and what I did right at the start in 2018, I was posting with people significantly larger than me, but I wasn't fanboying them. I was speaking with them on a level. And so the post would be this nobody, Richard Moore, a person that had a big audience, but we were acting as peers. because we were talking on a level, and that made people think, well, he must be at that level too. So perception, wrong or right, is reality. And so you have to consider how we use that in the right way, as long as it's ethical, of course.
Right. Very interesting. Well, so right now then, for individuals who are looking at whatever product they might have, service that they want to offer, and let's just use LinkedIn, as that example. Like if they're starting out, like what should that look like for them? And I guess in some ways, maybe where I'm going here to a degree too is, as you are, helping people at different points of their, own journey, like what would you recommend to somebody's trying to start off so that they can maximize that time and effort? I know you dropped a lot of gold already, but if you were kind of take a step by step, what would that look like?
Yeah. So we've got to remember the context. We're a nobody. Just like the best analogy is the playground at school, and you being parachuted not parachuted because that'd get a lot of great attention, wouldn't it? But like you suddenly appear, also great attention.
But you gave us the first tip, parachute in.
Yeah. No parachuting, no teleporting, but you happen to be in the playground and no one knows you. So what you've got is all the cool kids and all these popular people and the ones who have social clout and things like that. And then there's little you on your own, physically away from people as well. So
you just took me back to my schoolyard.
I know, me too. I get like PTSD when I talk about it. But what I need to remember is that when I'm saying something, no matter how profound it is, and no matter how well written and so on, no one's going to hear me. So it doesn't matter. So the question is like, what do I do to fix this problem? And it's almost always, because I work with a lot of people who are like consultants or coaches who are typically ex-corporate. Look, I'm really good at a thing. How do I sell it? And so the first step is to recognize that it's almost never your proposition, nor the thing you want to say. Sure, do a course on how to write nice content and so on. What you need to recognize is you have a distribution issue. And that's fixed in one of two ways. Well, there is a third way. The third way is write so wonderful a set of content that people can't help themselves and everyone loves it. But that's asking for a bit of a miracle. First thing is go to where the audience is. Go get your audience. There's a group of people over here all chatting and there's a lot of activity. Go break into that circle. So I'm trying to help people visualize it. Go to where the conversations already are that are aligned or at least adjacent to the space that you inhabit in terms of the topic, and go be part of that conversation. The nice thing is you can just piggyback someone else's hard work and jump into where there's a lot of activity. So until the days that your content starts to get some traction, sure, do your post each day, but go show up elsewhere. And the second thing I do, and I mentioned a second ago, I was doing this within a few months, if not sooner, is go and try and like stand next to someone who is a bit more of an active network in that group. Interact with them a bit. So maybe you comment a few times. Don't just try and be useful or practical in the comments, because everyone's doing that. So be useful or practical, but also be a bit human. That might be a banter or a joke. Just don't overstep, but like just show you a bit human too. And a lot of, people will be maybe mentioning a little thing in a PS. So talk about that, for instance. And what you're trying to do is catch that person's eye. And the natural move after that, if they're responding to your comment, for instance, is to then move to DMs. Don't fanboy. They get enough of that. But what you want to do is just be normal. Just ask them how they are. Say it was a great post. And, then look at where you've got something in common. You're making friends professionally.
Right.
Artin's like, I'm in LA, and I'm like, oh, cool. So I might be in LA next quarter. So that would be nice. We've already, before you joined us, Michael, talked about maybe hanging out. So you can see you've got some commonality there. I'm really still struggling with Idaho, but we'll find something. but the point I'm making is you're making professional friends with this person. And what I did was within a couple of months, I was saying, would you mind? Like, it would be so nice to connect properly because we'd had, 6 DMs back and forward. Like, should we grab a quick call? No pretense, not trying to sell, just grab a quick call. And every week I would try and have one call with someone who maybe had 8,000 followers or whatever. We'd get on well, again, just be not like shoot the breeze, talk about the thing you've got in common. I just talked about LinkedIn. And so what I used to do is I'd say, I hope you don't mind. Can I flick on record? Because you'll probably say something intelligent and I could make it into a post. What's wonderful about these people in the playground who are popular and that they don't half like it when someone wants to do a post about them. So what you say is like, you know, would you mind, or even quote them or something like that. They're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Off you go after the call. You do a little post, you tag them, and of course, and you say, "Hey, I just want to say thanks so much. I did a little post about us," and you go from there. And what happens is over time, you get these step changes in followers because the herd over here sees their mate over with you and like, well, who's that guy? And it's just this association. So born of the playground. If only I knew this when I was 6, guys. But like, this is the stuff
I was just thinking, your kids, they got to benefit from this.
I know. They're fine. Their mother was very social. So, but the point is like, that's how we do it. And it's never the content. Because, and I proved this point, I just finished to kind of on this point by what I did about a year or so ago. I deliberately wrote a rubbish post. So deliberately a terrible hook. And then the second line was something like, and this line's no good either. And then I wrote this awfully laid out post. The photo, I deliberately had a picture of my chin. That was it. And it got like 50,000 views, 500 likes. And I'm like, and even in the comments, I'm like, and I think, no, but in the end of the post, I was writing something like, this post will get thousands of views. And I've not even posted it yet. And in the comments, it said, like, it was doing updates. I was like, there's 2,000 views and it's been like 50 minutes. And I was like, point proven. And the point I'm making is you can do what you like when you've got everyone listening. And one of my friends, this was on Twitter, but one of my friends many years ago accidentally, you know, like when you call someone by accident on your phone, she did it, but with the letter T. She hit the letter T and tweeted it. And it went viral. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, so profound," and everyone's like, "Oh, it's really deep. I wonder what you're trying to say." And she was like, "Obviously," and they obviously made it a joke. But the point is, if you've got that kind of clout, you can do what you like. But at the start, you have to go get your audience. And I just must say, don't try and be hyper profound because people aren't in a stage where they want you to be like that. So if you're trying to give a big, fat, profound mic drop and these platitudes, people are like, yeah, but who are you? And so they won't want to like that as much. It's best to get your distribution game right and focus on being useful practically. And that's what worked for me is like, look, here's my expertise. Here's 3 things that can really work. And if no one's looking at your post, it's a networking issue, probably not a post issue. And because what you want to recognize is when people are like, almost everyone will be like seeing you for the first time and they don't want to roll their eyes going, here's someone who thinks they're all that. Instead, it's like, look, I've done all this experience. I've had this experience and here are 3 things I think might help. Just be helpful to start with. And that's the right kind of value to begin with. When you grow up and everyone's fawning over you, well, then you can, you know, you can speak like it's the Oscars ceremony or something.
Right. But that's brilliant. I mean, it's, as you say it that way, it seems so, simple, but still hard. But simple in terms, I mean, I guess everything fits that one way or another. We all know we should eat healthy, but that's a different story of doing it. But when it comes down to it though, it's so interesting because you basically painted a picture of, good networking in many ways. And if you're just doing that and you're reaching out and again, in different ways, you know, adding value to others, sometimes adding value to others is in terms of, giving significance to others, building trust in that way with others. And I, as I say the word value, I'm also trying to be careful to not, you know, as your earlier lesson, it's not just that. So don't get me wrong. But what I mean still is the idea that you are looking to expand this network of yours, which then helps with distribution. And it's crazy when you start thinking about it that way, because it is true. It's like when you look at a lot of these individuals out there, and Art and I have had this argument before. We're like, why did their post do so well? The post we just wrote feels so much stronger or better than this, but it doesn't matter because you don't own the distribution.
I mean, there's such a good example. One of my customers used to be I think she was global head of brand, I think it was, for Universal Pictures, the movie company. And before that, she was director of marketing for Barclays, the group, like the banks.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Right.
she is insane. Like, and one of she like had like a $3 billion budget or something like that when she was at Universal, something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and she's a perfect example of this. She's like, look, I'm new. I'm a consultant now. I'm not on payroll for that lot anymore. I'm working for myself. And you've got like children by comparison. I'm not saying she's old. She's lovely.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, you know, relatively speaking, children who are getting incredible amount of engagement. And
Right.
it's not to do, it's a perfect example of it's not to do with your experience or if you're better. It's
Yeah.
about if you're most popular and have people around you. Now, what's interesting is she was fed up of that whole how to get lots of engagement and followers thing, and everyone saying, well, engagement is everything, and I just give value, and she was getting nowhere. What's
Yeah.
interesting is when she started talking about being useful, basically, by and bringing in her leverage, which I remember one of her posts said, I used to control a $3 billion budget. Suddenly
Yeah.
everyone started paying attention and seeing her in the right way. But what's interesting is that the right people start seeing her in the right way as well.
Mhm.
And I absolutely love the little guy that has 1,400 followers, but is brilliant at what they do. One of my clients is a coach. She works 4 days a week. She's a mum of 3. She's run a company for like 3.5 years. She will make $1 million this year from LinkedIn. She's almost there.
Wow.
At the end of this year, $1 million. And she
Amazing.
doesn't, I think she's just about to hit 20,000 followers. She's getting better engagement, but it was like, I reckon her average for the year is like 25 likes, but she speaks to the right people in the right way. And she's not waking up in the morning wondering how many impressions she's got. She's looking at nurture in the DMs. And I love it because underneath all of this, look at me, I'm engineering popularity, because it is engineered. In fact, it's an engineered perception of popularity.
Yeah.
You've got these people who are actually good at what they do. And what's so important is they understand it's not about I'll eventually get returns when I'm big. It's I get returns when I deserve it, which is I say the right things to the right people. But
Right.
it really helps to reach out and build your network and make sure every day you're adding 3 to 5 at least new people.
Sure.
They don't have to be top of funnel. They might be just people that are now in your network that might be allies that support your world, you know. And I think it's really crucial to nurture and build a network, because that's your foundation, atop of which sits your content.
But that's huge, and that gives people clear, measurable ways that they can, look at their progress as it slowly grows, versus just looking at am I hitting the 100, whatever those numbers are. And I've heard a few of those other stories about the individuals who, from the outside, they're not the I don't know, Laura's, the Yasmin's, the others who are out there on LinkedIn killing it, the Justin Welsh's, but at the same time, because they have attracted, that key customer who is, honed in on what it is that they're looking for, it's like they could do really well. And in some ways, actually, I don't want to say have it easier, but they're not, like it takes a lot when you got to nurture and be in there and respond. Like I know sometimes for some of these people who are huge, it's like I spent almost the entire day just in there commenting that. And again, it obviously worked for their growth, but finding that right balance with the right people, I think is so key.
I think you're right. I think you're really right. And you've got to remember that for some people, based on the service they sell, their leverage is having viral posts and having loads of followers.
That's a good point.
You can't say you're a great copywriter if no one reads you, or specifically, you can't say you're good at writing copy for LinkedIn if no one shows up for your content on LinkedIn. You can't say you know how to grow a following if you don't have a big following. So that has to be your leverage. But for everyone else, like no one's checking those metrics. They're checking are you any good at what you have to say.
What you just said, though, I think, again, is just worth reinforcing, because it's true. All of us who oftentimes some of the key people we're looking for, they often happen to sell products. I'll just be it on LinkedIn, be it on Instagram, be it on YouTube, that are actually teaching people how to grow on those things. And therefore they have to have that. But that's who people see as their mentor and automatically assume, even though back to it, most people don't need that to have a successful.
No, they certainly don't. And like if you're a CEO of a cybersecurity company,
Yeah.
You can't, I mean, it'd be lovely to be an influencer. That makes life a little easier. But like mapping to the same results is crazy. And like,
Right.
doing like overdoing storytelling and like doing all of these, like doing nonstop selfies. Like there's a place for all of that technique. But if you go so extreme on it, then you're building a persona that is geared towards engineering a perception of popularity. There's nothing wrong with selfies, and there's nothing wrong with storytelling, and there's nothing wrong with vulnerabilities, but you like use it in the right way. I've never posted pictures of my daughters, but that's my personal like reasons for it. But at the same time, I don't need to do that because I'm not trying to map towards a world where as many people as possible are fond of me. What I'm interested in is, do the right people see me in the right way? And of course, for those people who are selling a very low ticket, like you mentioned, Justin Wells, his course is like $150. So it's perfect to sell high volume, low ticket products, especially when it's very meta, because he's selling how to do the thing he's teaching.
Right.
But when you're going for high ticket, B2B, multiple stakeholder, long sales cycle, enterprise products sales, then it's going to be a very different process. And you need to be that influencer of sorts and a thought leader, but you've got to recognize that it's not about volume. It's about here are the metrics. If you can add 5 to 8 new people a day who are maybe good in your audience, but also potential buyers or in that ecosystem, just add them top of funnel. Some will see your content. That's great. If you can have 3 to 5 conversations each day, deep conversations where you go through a process of getting to know them and nurture, then that will spit out one, ideally, call scheduled per day. If you schedule one call a day, you will probably have a very, very good shot at goal of those per week. If you're selling, like as most people selling like consulting services do, if you sell, for instance, 2 to 6 grand a month as a price point, that's a deal a week. If you're selling 50 grand price point per month, then it might not be quite as accessible to get a deal a week, but you certainly should be getting a couple a month, or at least one a month, because that's not that much money. If it's multiple 6 figures requires lawyers, then like maybe one of those a month is turning into something like which is going somewhere. But the point is always inputs. Like, am I doing the right things top of funnel, adding people, networking well, doing the good content? Am I having the right number of conversations? And again, not hundreds. Like if anyone suggests do 50 DMs a day, it doesn't make sense, because when you're prescribed volume, it's to compensate for a lack of competency. So it's far better to say, right, if I have 3 to 5 conversations that are really showing I'm aware and care about them and so on, that should yield 1 call booked per day. Yeah. And like 1 call booked per day with the right person who sees you in the right way. If you can't close one of those or take it very advanced, now you've got a closing issue. You've no longer got a content marketing issue. So you can identify on the process where the issue is. Can you tell I was a sales director once? Every step of the process is there.
Yeah, that's great. And you've also just explained why this guy I said earlier, Tony, was having at least 1 date a week, because he put in 50 ads every day for their numbers.
Exactly. But it was the same when I started. No one knew me, and so I had to do $100 a day to get 4 pitches in an entire day, like 8 hours working day, 4 pitches. And I would probably at the start I was getting like 1 deal a week, and that was when I was selling it. I was about 3.5 grand for a year. This was internet marketing in the early 2000s, and people were like, "Oh, come on, fine, I've got some leftover money. You can have that." But I don't expect anything. We'll be over here spending 10,000 quid in a print publication, because that's what we've always done. I'm like, you know what I mean? So, but that always mapped to sales, and it's interesting that, if you do the right things and trust the process, you tend to craft a result. But we just need to remember that all deals end with an interaction between one person and another person. So you need to get to that point, as opposed to, unless you're selling really low ticket where you don't touch the buyer and they just buy on their own, in which case you don't need to be on the phone. Jeff Bezos doesn't have to get on the phone to close everyone. Amazon's doing the job.
Not anymore. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, Richard, how can people find you who have heard a lot of what you said here and be like, hey, I want to talk to this guy?
There's a number of ways. LinkedIn, unsurprisingly, is a good shout if you want to find me there. Or there's therichardmoore.com. But the best place to find me is on the Art of Sell community, because I'm making sure I'm being as present as possible for the people in there. So you can find out all about that on my profile, though, on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in, because they're weird, /Richard James Moore, Moore, and
Awesome.
all things from there. But as a thank you, I'm more than happy to answer any questions to anyone who's listened to this and wants to get a bit more detail as a thank you for their audience.
That's great. We love it. And we will link to everything that you had mentioned below this video when it's out. Otherwise, we love this. This was great. We have things we're going to go implement. So thank you.
Oh, okay. That's good to hear. Well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for giving me time to rant, monologue, and teach. It's a wonderful combination for me.
This
You're
is
good
very
at it.
no, it's great way to start Monday morning for Michael and I, since we're in the West Coast of the United States. But this has
Absolutely.
been wonderful, and for anybody watching and listening, if there's additional comments or questions, just drop them below, and hopefully we can get a conversation started there as well. And then we'll see everybody on the next one.
Thank you so much.